All right, everyone, welcome to the 340th edition of the Holy Backboard podcast. I am Dustin here in sunny Rip City, and I got my man.
Sage chilling live and direct. This is a couple hours after the draft lottery because we're adults now and can't record directly after something happens. We have to schedule it a little bit better. But we're here to talk about our thoughts and then do a mock draft about the lottery picks. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how this draft goes now. There's potential to get a generational talent, but how nervous were you when the Blazers could have been like the sixth, fifth, or fourth pick? Like,
Oh
were
no, I was watching it with Olga and Ari, and Olga was holding Ari, and I was like rubbing his feet, and I was just like every time a pick was announced, I was like, no, 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 and like it just like kept building and building. Like, but I was telling Olga, I was like, we don't have to worry about until pick number 9. And honestly, you kind of do have to worry because you don't want any of those other teams jumping ahead of you.
yeah,
So it's just like,
leapfrogging.
okay, everything's status quo, status quo. And then once you see that we weren't at number
Mm-hmm.
5, I mean, I was just like top 4. Like I really felt 2007 all over again. Had good vibes throughout the whole day. Wore my Brandon Roy shirt to jury duty. Um, we were just really trying to do what we can to recreate what happened 16 years ago. And I felt I was like, we're top 4. Like we got B Roy up there. Like just seeing him up there again, representing the Trailblazers. It's been so long since we've seen the natural in association with Rip City. And then you find out you're not number 4. And that's the biggie. You want to
Yeah.
be in that top 3. And you're like, oh my God, this could happen. And 3 was when I was like, it's probably, I was like, if we can get by 3, it's gonna happen. And we just couldn't get by 3. It's definitely a letdown. Like looking back after you've had time to let it set, like, no, moving up is fantastic. You take that any day of the week.
Mm.
But in the moment when you're going after Victor Wembanyama, the number 1 overall pick, it's like a reveal after reveal. It's almost like you're doing deal or no deal, right? And you're like picking the right briefcase time after
Mm.
time. And our luck just, I wouldn't say it ran out. It just came to an end.
Yeah.
That's where the journey was. But it was a major adrenaline rush. I felt it better this year than last year. And, I'll take this adrenaline rush, this, 30 minutes of drawn out television over a play-in, over a 5 or 6 game series in the first round. Like, I know people may be opposed to tanking. They may not like the product over the last month of the season. They may be wanted the playoffs, but this is how you build success. This is how you get to be one of the final 4 teams that are playing basketball right now. Like, especially a small market like Portland, you gotta have skin in the game. You got to put some money down to get those odds. And Portland did, and they moved up. They were really the only team that moved up, outside of the top,
Mm. We
five or
had the
six
biggest
teams like
movement.
Indiana, Orlando, Washington. They all stayed
Mm-hmm.
status quo. Detroit was the big loser, but like, you kind of expected Charlotte and San Antonio and Houston to be in that top 4. Like it was crazy. Portland was really the only team out of the projected top 4 that made their way into that top 4. It is a bit of a salt in the wound. Like the knife's already in you, and they twist it, and you get a little bit of salt in the wound. Ben Golliver informed us all that Portland was 1 number off, on the 4 number combination, from getting their 1 overall pick. And I've also heard that they were 1 number off from moving up a second year in a row in 2008 to get Derrick Rose. So Portland has come very close before, but it's always interesting to kind of like let it sink in and look back historically. Last year worked out perfectly for Portland. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't want anybody other than Shaden Sharp. You look back in 2007, we would have been much better getting the 2nd overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
Go back, even further, 2005, Portland moves up to 3, and they trade it back, and they pass on, Darren Williams and Chris Paul. You even look in 2007, if they just would have got the 3rd pick, there's Al Horford right there. Al Horford is still getting biz
He's in the
for,
league. He's on the start. He's starting on a
he's not just starting,
potential.
he's doing work
Yeah.
for a potential championship contender on the Boston Celtics. And you look in 2000, what is it, 18? The Suns, they finally got breakthrough. They win the lottery. They take DeAndre Ayton. They pass on Trae Young and Luka Doncic. Like, I'm not saying Victor's not going to hit. I'm just saying maybe 5 years from now, we'll be thinking, oh, that's awesome that we got the third pick.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, yes, number one we would have been
Dope. It would have
the
been dope.
best possible scenario. But these things do have to play out. We have to watch, everything unfold. And with the time being, I will gladly take the number 3 overall pick. And if you are a Blazer fan who is interested in Scoot Henderson, I think there are two teams that you wanted to get the number 2 pick: the Indiana Pacers
And
and the Charlotte Hornets, because they both have not just established point guards, but young established point guards who don't play well off the ball,
mm-hmm.
and LaMelo Ball and Tyrese Halliburton, respectively. So you would think Brandon Miller would be a good bet to go number 2. And I know a lot of people are high on Brandon Miller. I've seen him as high as number 2 on big boards across a ton of different publications and pundits. However, neither of us are super high on Brandon Miller as a prospect. So there's a big difference in how I value that number 3 pick as to who's available. If is it Scoot
Absolutely.
or is it Brandon?
Context matters, especially with it being one of those teams that needs a wing player. Like LaMelo Ball is great, but the fact that they're so light in wings, it kind of makes sense that Brandon Miller is that guy. He's 6'9", can shoot, like has potential as a playmaker. Like LaMelo missed Miles Bridges. He missed having those wings. So if you can find a guy that can provide scoring and play fine defense, I think LaMelo can make him shine, especially with the nutty shooting. So, I mean, it's lucky that we got Scoot, or to have the potential of getting Scoot, but you know, we only had like a 30% chance at getting a top 3 pick. It's much better chance that we were worse. So I'm very happy to be picking at 3 rather than 9 or 8. So we had a very good draft lottery, and there's chances of it being a great draft because of that. So I mean, I was very excited, kind of bummed out, but then I realized who was 2, and I was like, okay, I like it. They don't particularly need a point guard. So it's a bummer that the Spurs, a Western Conference team, got Victor, but I feel like it's a good day for Rip City.
Absolutely. And maybe for Victor's sake, maybe for Portland's sake, it's best that he didn't end up in here with all of our history with injured big men. I wouldn't wish that on him, on anyone. And obviously, I'm not interested in rehashing all of those stories. So probably for the best. I still would have liked to seen it play out, obviously, but it doesn't happen. And now the Blazers, Sage, are heading into the offseason with a bigger and better trade asset, or just asset in general, than they had, a month ago when the season.
A day ago.
When you look at this draft, in my opinion, it's a 2-player draft, and then there's just a good crop of role players with some of the lottery talent, if they hit, could become superstars. But we have discussed, in our Future Friday series, that there's just, I think, such a small margin of error for those players, hitting their 99th percentile. Like, a lot would have to go right for it to happen. So if you're able to land Scoot Henderson, that's a no-brainer. I don't trade the pick at all. Like, we were discussing this over text, like, obviously if you don't get Victor, but you get the chance to draft Scoot, who are you trading it for? Like, it's like maybe 5 or 6 players on my list that I'm willing to trade a prime Russell Westbrook / Derrick Rose type of talent at the point guard. Factor in that you could pair him
Who's a
up
better
with Shaedon
defender than
Sharpe,
both of those two?
that you could pair him up with Shaedon Sharpe,
Mm-hmm.
looking at a souped up version of Terry Porter and Clyde Drexler, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that backcourt brought that team to 2 finals in 3 years and won 63 games in the year sandwiched in between, something that still hasn't been replicated in the Rose City. And then you can start to really fill out the roster. And when you have your backcourt set, especially with a facilitator, point guard is not the most important, but a very important position in the league. And then you get that elite wing and Shaden. I just think those two would just flourish so well off of one another and would attract players to want to play alongside of them. So for me to pry that pick out of my hands, I mean, honestly, and this may be an oversell of the pick or oversell of Scoot Henderson, the prospect. But Sage, I'm looking at guys like I need to see big names like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, Jason Tatum.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the players that I need in return for that number 3 pick, because it's not. And I've seen this a lot with trade proposals, and you brought up a bunch, right? Like you texted me, you're like, there's John Collins, there's Jonathan Kuminga, DeAndre Ayton, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, Pascal Siakam, Karl Anthony Towns. Of all of those, I hesitated at Karl Anthony Towns. So I went over to our good old pal, ESPN Trade Checker, and saw that Cat's making $33 million. The problem Portland has with trying to go out and acquire one of these top-notch players,
we have to give out that
to
money.
be able to match salary. This isn't baseball. There is a salary cap here in Portland because of either impending free agents or just an overall a young roster, has two realistic tradable contracts in Anthony Simons and Yusuf Nurkic. So not only are you giving up the 3 pick, you're also giving up depth, talent, and really your only other avenue to improve the team. So that's why it can't be Pascal Siakam. It can't be OG Anunoby. It can't be just really good to really good players. You need elite with this 3 pick that's going to be able to roll alongside Jeremy, Shaden, and Damian. So that's why when you hear names like, Nicola, Joel, and Jason, like it has to be that player, because that's how you contend. And why I don't think it's feasible is because I don't think those teams are in the market to trade those type of players.
Yeah, totally.
And Portland shouldn't be in the market to take anything less in return. It's not a good symbiotic relationship, right?
So if Scoot's gone and it's Jarris or Brandon Miller, does that change your perception?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you still have to apply the same philosophy, right? You still have to say, okay, the Raptors still really want Brandon Miller and they're willing to give us Pascal Siakam. You can't trade Anthony and Yusuf and the 3 picks. So this is where it gets really difficult in the player that you need to go after, is because now are you really in a better position than you were before?
That's a lot of depth, and we struggled to get depth in general. So are you really are you really ready to rely on Nasir Little to play 82 games? Like that's a lot of pressure. And if we have low depth, that puts a lot of pressure on guys that have had the problem with availability. So yeah, Jarris, I would be intrigued with Cat, but the guys that we mentioned, I just feel like Jarris either could be a better fit, a better player, or we're just giving up too much for a player that's a little bit better than Jarris Walker. So Scoot's just a non-starter. Like we're getting the second best player in the draft at the 3rd picks. We're paying significantly less than we would. Plus, I mean, the potential of Shaden and Scoot is just so tantalizing that I'm not trading it for a guy who's in his late 20s, early 30s, who's on his 2nd or 3rd major contract. It just doesn't make sense, because we can control Scoot with restricted free agency, so it can be on the team for a long time, and we have Shaden Sharp, so it just doesn't make sense to make any trades. But then with Jarris, it's just like he also fits like a glove with Shaden, so it's like I'm not trying to give up legitimately good players just to get a little bit better of a player.
The trade I look at, if Scoot Henderson has gone at number 2, is you look at a team like Utah, right? They've got 6 and 11. Or do they really want Brandon Miller? If so, then I probably make that trade, because you're guaranteed probably one of the Thompson twins,
Or
Jarris Walker
Hendrick.
or Taylor
Mhm.
Hendricks at 6, and then you have another asset at 11. If there's somebody at 9 or 10 you covet, you can package 23 with that 11 pick and move up. You can do some things there. So if you're gonna move it, you have to be certain that the player at 3, if Scoot is gone, like it just doesn't tickle your fancy. And you have to understand, you have to maneuver the draft board. You have to be like,
Do you think Houston takes Jarris? Do you think Detroit takes Jarris?
well, we'll get into that in our mock
So,
draft.
but I'm just
Um,
thinking, like, if you're trading with the Utah pick,
I do
you
not
have
think
to think
Houston
about,
is in the market for Jarris Walker.
yeah. So you got to think about, okay, I have two power forwards that I really like. Is there a 100% chance that we get one of those? So it's if we're trading back because Scoot's gone and neither of us are very excited about Brandon, like make solid guesses. Like I don't think Orlando is going to want Jarris Walker when they have all of those bigs. So that's a safe pick and things
And I
like
would
that.
say a lot of it's going to be like, what does the combine tell us? What do these workouts tell us? You get a sense of speaking with a kid. I'll take Amen Thompson, for example, potential through the roof, checks every single box except for the shot. What type of, just talk, what type of work ethic does he have? Like, talk to rival coaches, not just his coaches that maybe we're going to fluff him up. Like, talk to opposing players. Do your intel. Like, this is what Mike Schmitz now gets paid the big bucks to do,
Yeah,
right? Like, if Scoot's gone, you really have to figure out who is going to be the right fit. Because if Amen is just even slightly below league average shooting, he and Shaden are
huge,
devastating,
huge, yeah.
absolutely devastating with his playmaking, the athleticism they have on the wings.
Size too.
I mean, the size. I mean,
You're switching everything.
we haven't seen a wing tandem like that since the early '90s Pip and Jordan Bulls, like when they were freak athletes and they were playing everything in the passing lanes. Like, so that would give me, if I trust a men just to become a little bit better shooter, that gives me the only hesitation of trading 3 if Scoot's gone. Brandon to me is not really an option. I think taking 3 is too high for Jarris Walker. I would trade back for him if that's really your guy. But if you really fall in love with one of the Thompson twins, the Portland's in a good spot here.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the bottom line. They have options that fit for the long term. I think people wanting that win with Dame, quick rebuild. That was when you got Victor Wembanyama. That's how you can do it. Is if you were to land that number 1 overall pick and he can come in right away and become your all-star, and then it's pretty easy to build around. I think they're going to have to do some soul searching though, because if it becomes clear that Scoot Henderson is going to be available at 3, intel leaks and you hear all of that stuff, and you there's no rumors of teams moving up to take that number 2 pick away from Charlotte to draft Henderson. Like if it becomes clear that Henderson will be there and he does a phenomenal job at the workout, Portland has to do some soul searching, because if you're going to hit the reset button, now is the time. Like
I was doing.
I cannot stress that enough. If you're going to do it, just do it now. Do not do it next year. Do not do it 2 years down the road when not only is Dame's values deteriorated, there's not a prospect like Scoot Henderson next year.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, the next year's draft has not, unless something dramatically changes from what I've read, next year's draft just isn't what the past 2 drafts have become or could be. So don't wait too long. Like this is the time. If you're going to do it now. You have everything lined up for you. Dame's value is at an all-time high. You have a generational potential point guard to replace him, right?
Yeah,
The
replacing one
the
generational
rebuild,
point guard with another is pretty awesome.
I mean, this is like Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers stuff right here, right?
I just hate both of those dudes, so I didn't want to mention it. So I was on the Blazers Edge radio today, and we were talking about the playoffs. What people want is the KD trade to happen for the Blazers, but there isn't a KD out there, and KD that trade gave up all the depth that the Suns had. So at best, we end up like the Suns, with a worse coach and a worse secondary star. I'm just
Phoenix finished in fewer games than they did last year without Kevin Durant. Last
yeah.
year they got busted at home in game 7. This year they got busted at home in game 6. So they didn't even advance farther with Kevin Durant. And that's exactly what I've been preaching to the choir. Like you're preaching to the choir right here, Sage, because even Phoenix with a star in Devin Booker, they were not even a factor with Kevin Durant. And the problem with that is Durant's now pushing 35. He's coming off. He still has had a torn Achilles. He's had a foot injury in the past. He's not the same player. You gave up all of your young wing depth, gave up all of your assets to go out and get somebody else with those draft picks and pick swaps. Chris Paul's contract is damn near immovable, and
He's getting older.
DeAndre Ayton just probably had one of the worst playoff performances I've seen from a potential,
Max
fringe
player.
all-star type, but max player. Yeah, and Chris Paul is completely cooked. So now there's not a lot of avenues for them to get better. Like,
so wouldn't you want to give yourself more avenues to get better than pushing everything into Pascal Siakam, who isn't KD? Like even this version of KD, Pascal Siakam's not that. So I know that waiting for something good to happen, for something good is tough in this society, but the best possible way for us to be better as a team, not the Damian Lillards, as the Portland Trailblazers, is to develop talent and nurture that talent and get more of it, and have Shaden have that growth, have potentially Scoot Henderson have that growth, and be smart with our draft picks. And we hired Smits to do that. I think we should let him do his job. And he did such a good job with Shaden Sharp and Walker. Let's give him another shot at doing it. And now we have 3 draft picks instead of 2.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you go all in, you have to make, and Joe Cronin has addressed this before. Like, he's aware. Like, if you go all in, you have to have like whatever you took to give up what you wanted. The remaining pieces have to be enough. Like, you still have to have depth and have quality players. It can't just be
we don't even have that now.
Yeah, like we're you look at Minnesota, they gave up the farm for Rudy Gobert to become a first round exit. The Atlanta Hawks gave up 3 first round picks for DeJounte Murray, and now they're already, they lose in the first round. They're already thinking about trading Trae Young because that fit doesn't work with those two. Yeah. Portland, just look back. It doesn't generally work when you trade everything you have in the chamber. When your war chest, like you give up everything you got. So here, take the briefcase. It just, for most teams, every team aside from the Lakers, it just doesn't work. Like
and Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I mean, they got a chip from Drew, so I know damn well you and I would take a chip in our lifetime.
Absolutely.
A chip in our lifetime.
It only cost Milwaukee draft picks. It didn't cost them a young player. They just gave up picks. So, but yes. I would say with the Lakers and with the Bucks, they had generational players in place that play a position of scarcity. 6'9", 6'10", wings that move like guards are, just the best type of currency that you can have to spend in the league. And that's why, it was able to work. They didn't have to move Chris Middleton. Like, they still had a solid foundation. They went out and brought in Brooke Lopez. Like, the Bucks were ready to go. Like, that was a team that was just like, okay, we'll give up our draft currency, but we have a squad around Drew. Bring him in, we're good to go.
And then New Orleans trading 2 generational talents. They got a shitload of assets for it.
Did you just call Drew Holiday a generational talent?
No, shut up. He's a generational talent at defense.
He's a generational talent in your heart.
In my heart, yeah.
In your heart.
2 very good players.
All right, Sage, before we get into this post-lottery mock draft, we have a couple of fan questions that I want to get to. First is from our guy Peter at Rip Citizen. This is a good one I haven't thought about in a while. But he says, in hindsight, was quote-unquote retooling after LaMarcus Aldridge and the band left in the summer of 2015 the best option? Should we have completely started over and rebuilt through the draft? so much of the moves made in the last decade have fucked us.
Well, LaMarcus left, so we didn't really have any
No,
options.
no, no. So Peter's question, and this is what Neil Olshey was trying to do, was in the summer of 2015 when it was evident LaMarcus was gone, 6 of the top 7 leading scorers were gone. It was going to be the Damon CJ show, and they were going to try to tank their ass off and land a top pick in the 2016 draft. I mean, that was the plan. The Vegas had us at 23
Yeah.
wins. Portland goes out, gets into the second round of the playoffs. That following summer, they hand out a ton of money to Evan
Oh, they're
Turner,
talking about that year. Okay.
Myers Leonard,
Okay.
Maurice Harkless, Alan Crabb. And that was one of the first moves that really put one, maybe both hands tied behind Portland's back. It's a good question because the draft again, that draft, the 2016 draft, was not a good draft. I mean, even at the time, it wasn't considered particularly good. And looking back now, it really hasn't aged well. At the time, the prize was Ben Simmons.
Ew.
And he had a couple of
oh yeah, I remember us talking about how great Ben
he had
Simmons.
a couple of all NBA seasons, but he's basically unplayable now. I'm just going to run through the top 10. Then you have Brandon Ingram, 7 years in the league. I would say it took him like 4 just
He
to get to
needed
an
to get
all-star.
strong. He needed to get real strong, real fast.
Jaylen Brown, probably the best player out of the draft. But then you've got Dragon Bender, Chris Dunn, Buddy Hield, Jamal Murray, who's I think a CJ McCollum level player, Marquise Chris, Jakob Pertl, and Thonmaker. Just to be fair, I'll throw in Domantas Sabonis at 11, but again, he took about 4 or 5 years before he became all-star caliber as well. So that's, obviously if you tank and you land Jaylen Brown, things look a lot different. But what if you tank and you landed Dragon Bender,
Yeah.
right? Like, as much as those moves in 2016 pained me, the Blazers do have the ability to look back and say we made the Western Finals in 2019, and a lot of those players, Maurice Harkless, even Evan Turner in that Game 7 against the Denver Nuggets,
They helped. They helped make it.
They did help, and they did get to the Western Conference Finals, and because it was the only Western Conference Finals that we've seen since 2000, that holds some weight in my view. It just depends on who they would have taken, right? And then you go again, like, I think the biggest mess up, it wasn't necessarily the quote unquote retooling. It was Neil Olshey not knowing when to hold him and when to fold him, right? He was a prisoner of the moment.
Yeah.
After that playoff run of 2016, and he went out and he just spent a ton of Paul Allen's money. Nobody told Neil Olshey he had to match all those contracts and sign all of those free agents. Like,
And then the Evan Turner signing. Yeah.
so I don't think retooling was the problem. I think the problem was Neil Olshey's decision making. Maybe Paul Allen. I've heard rumors that he wanted to match Alan Crabb, and then you go the next year. They're set up in 2017 with 3 picks in the top, I think, 25 or 26, and they came away with Zach Collins and rest in peace, Caleb Swanigan. They passed on a lot of players who fans want now: Bam Adebayo, Donovan Mitchell,
Yeah.
OG Anunoby, Kyle Kuzma, Derek White, John Collins. Like, that was the draft that you needed to hit, and they didn't. So I don't think what they did during the 2015-2016 season was wrong or had any impact on the franchise moving forward. It was just the standalone decision making from Neil Olshey that kind of put Portland in a bind that they couldn't really move out from underneath. And
I think he thought there was like it was the success with those players was repeatable, like with Alan Crabb. Like, he thought that was like a repeatable task, but there was a lot of context that made them a second round team. The Clippers getting hurt that year, like there was a lot of things that went the Blazers' way in to getting a playoff spot. So I understand those mistakes, but it still does, like, with hindsight, yeah, he probably should have, but I remember feeling so good about the team's success the first year. So I get where Neil was coming from. It just was a bad mistake.
our last question is from Rip Village. He says, what type of all-in package, name the assets and the target, would cause you to want to keep the pick? I think he means would cause us to want to trade the pick because
We're keeping the pick if it's us.
yeah, yes. So what type of package would cause you to trade the pick? I think we've discussed if Scoot's available, it's got to be a first team all NBA type player, which
And
neither
no
of
one's
us
going to
really
do that for an all NBA team player.
What's that?
No one's going to trade an all NBA player for Scoot Henderson.
No, and the
So,
Blazers would
yeah.
be wise to not settle for anything less. But as we've discussed, it does become interesting if Scoot is off the board. Now you're choosing from a Thompson twin, Jarris
Brandon.
Walker or Brandon Miller. And for me, oof, I think it has to be a younger player on a rookie scale contract. So you're not having to give up
Would you trade three for Ivy?
Yusuf and Anthony may not fit this roster, but they still can be used to get you other pieces.
Would you do it for
Um,
Ivy? Would you trade three if Scoot's not there for Ivy?
do you think do you think Jaden Ivey can play point guard? Because
No,
that's
I
the
don't.
question. Then no. Like you have to look back. That's a really fun question because I like looking at it from a non, everyone brings up the goddamn Raptors and their players. Like I'm really kind of tired of talking about those guys. I'm kind of tired of talking about, Mikal Bridges. I don't, there's no way Brooklyn's trading Mikal Bridges. That's a good question though. Would you trade that pick for Mikal Bridges if Scoot's gone?
How much do we have to give up plus that pick?
That's the question. I wouldn't. I and then here's the problem. You're really mixing timelines if you get Mikal Bridges. You've got Dame in the twilight of his career. Mikal Bridges just now getting into his prime at 27-ish, and Shaden's 19, 20. Like you've got three separate timelines there that, as we've seen with the Warriors,
Yeah.
doesn't it doesn't work. Shout out to a YouTube channel I watch called a Terra Nova Basketball Study. Put out a video that's on my queue, but just the title alone caught my attention, and it was like the why two timelines doesn't work. The Warriors had three lottery picks in 2 years that didn't pan out, and they could have used those picks for win now players, and they could still be racking up championships.
Or
So
they could have picked much better than they did too.
yeah, so it's tough, especially because Steve Kerr doesn't like playing his younger players. Um, so Ivy's a no for me, but
Is J Dub? Santa Clara J Dub?
yeah, I would sincerely think about Jalen Williams from the Thunder, who was second Rookie of the Year voting. I still love Jabari Smith a lot. I think he would be much better removed from that toxic situation in Houston. And I think you could also pick up another pick from them if they were really enamored with somebody else.
And probably Tari or something too.
I mean, I think you got to look at young teams. Like Oklahoma City has players like Josh Giddey, who I would be all over. The Pacers, I know they're not trading Tyrese Halliburton, but those are the type of players
Would
I
you do
want.
Ben Matherin?
No, because he's a two guard. Like you
Yeah.
need to find somebody who's a legit 3 or 4 or legit floor general. Like this now, I think if you're trading the pick, as odd as it seems, it's not to win with Dame. It's how do
To
we
win
build
over
around
J-
Shaden Sharp?
Yep.
Like I think we've spent too much time discussing why we don't think building a winner around Dame is sustainable or likely. It kind of sucks your soul out a little bit because of what Dame's given to the city and the franchise. But those moves of 16 and 17, they have their impact and they linger. And it's going to be difficult for Portland to have a 1 year turnaround just with the 3 pick. Like, and I don't think it would be smart to figure out a way to get your pick back from Chicago and then just go crazy and just go on a binger at the casino and just say, here, take all of our chips. We just want one player back if it's not going to
If
knock
it's not better
anybody.
than KD.
Yeah. Yeah. KD wasn't good enough. KD was not good enough. Let that sink in. Kevin Durant was not good enough.
Yeah.
And
I'm trying to
players
think.
above him just don't come on the trade market. So it's you can maybe hope and pray that Joel Embiid gets out of Philly. They've already fired Doc Rivers, but I think that's going to be their last gasp resort. I don't think they're going to trade the reigning MVP, but even if you do, now you have to worry about injury history as well. Like he was banged up in the playoffs
Mhm.
again. He's never played in the conference finals. So
Would you do
it's
Tyrese Maxey for 3?
no,
Yeah.
no,
So
no.
I mean, it's a specialized player that it's tough. Like it's legitimately players of Jalen Williams from Santa Clara and better. And Tyrese Maxey's a combo. So it's I do feel like trading 3 for a younger player is a better plan than trading 3 and Ant and Nurk and future first for whoever.
All right, Sage, we did a pretty good deep dive on our mock draft last time around. Spent a bit of time going through our reactions, our trades, our thoughts on that. Let's go a little rapid fire for our mock draft 2.0, this time with the lottery fully in place. Do you want to start with the first pick, or do you want me to start with the first pick?
You can start.
All
I mean,
right.
Wemby's easy.
Yeah, we're not going to spend any time with this. The Spurs will take Victor Wembanyama with the first overall pick. From David Robinson in 87 to Duncan in 97, the Spurs luck out yet again, leaving the Charlotte Hornets on the clock at number 2 and an interesting decision to make.
I mean, having LaMelo Ball and Terry Rozier have to factor into my decision of who I draft. The fact is, they have Gordon Hayward and Kelly Oubre as their only wing players. Gordon Hayward hasn't been healthy since that ankle injury, really. Kelly Oubre is fine, but I bet he's a free agent this year. So they really need to get more wings to make LaMelo's life easier. So even though I personally don't value him this high, I am taking Brandon Miller at 2 because he just fits a lot of the needs. I know that he's not the best defender, but you can put him at the 4 since he's so tall. But he is a knockdown shooter, even though he has some issues with his shooting form. I'm going Brandon Miller because of the need they have for wings and the fact that they have an elite young point guard that was drafted like 3 or 4 years ago. So they don't need a new point guard. We're gonna build around LaMelo, and we're gonna use the second overall pick on Brandon Miller.
All right. I'm taking Scoot Henderson.
Yeah, you're
I'm not
running up
gonna,
there. You're
yeah,
you're
I'm running
fucking
up to the
sprinting.
podium. I am now completing the rebuild, starting the rebuild with Scoot and Shaden, and then I think you start to explore what Damian Lillard can bring you, and you can further enhance and speed up that reset or
Is
rebuild.
Ant is Anthony Simons safe on this team if this if we get Scoot in this draft? Because I would sure love to pair Scoot with one of the power forward players that we love, like Jarris or Taylor Hendricks. Because I feel like the rebuild would be better if more depth was spread around instead of 3 guards and Shaden. So if we could trade it and then get like a power forward that we like, would that be an option for the Blazers?
I mean, it should be right. I think if you get Scoot and you're moving Dame, I think everything has to be on the
Everything
table in
that's not
terms of
Shaden Sharp. Yeah.
yeah, except Shaden. Like I think Anthony just he doesn't fit. He's kind of the square peg into the round hole. And when you factor in, like I would love Anthony if he was a sixth man, just a gunner off the bench. But you can't pay those players $25 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
That value is just not there. And so again, you have a contract that is dictating value.
And his
And
role.
exactly, you can only have so many $20+ million guys on your roster. Do you really want it being the third guard off your bench? No. Like so,
Fourth guard if
I
you're
would call up,
if you
I would
have
call
Shaden as
Orlando, and I would say let's do Wendell Carter Jr., maybe some salary, and I'll take that 11 pick from you, and then you can figure out a way to get Taylor Hendricks while also getting a young, mobile big that could really work well with your roster. And now again, you have another avenue to trade Yusuf Nurkic for, you can keep him for depth, or you can use him to acquire pieces
something.
across the front line, the wing, like whatever. So instead of like going all in and you're left with nothing, you can kind of strategically plan for the future, but use those pieces as almost individual avenues to upgrade the roster rather than just like, oh, here's our smorgasbord of assets. Please take them. So
I
that's
feel like we're what Blazer fans want, like a lot of Blazer fans want, is the one single bullet to achieve everything you want. I want to give myself as many bullets as I can to hit that target. So if it's if I can get 15, I'm gonna get 15 to hit that target instead of one just perfect, to hit those two birds or whatever the thing I'm trying to
who
say
do
is.
you
I want to
have
get my most. I
the
want the most
Rockets
out of
taking at number 4?
I have, huh? Rockets are kind of a tough team
New
because
coach.
new coach. They kind of missed out on Scoot and Victor and Brandon. This might be a weird one, but I'm going to Men Thompson because
Oh,
he
that's not weird at all. I think that's a no-brainer. They need that playmaker.
they need the playmaker, and then you can move off of KPJ, and then you have two young bulls to lead the backcourt. A men can actually pass and is a willing and great passer. So he would set up Jabari, who needs to be set up. He would set up Jalen because he's a very good cut. Jalen's a very good cutter. So you have all of this potential like greatness of shooting and cutting and driving and making Alperen Sengun just a beast because he's going to be single covered. So I'm going Amen Thompson for the playmaking and the size and the defense.
I'm going to make it back-to-back Thompson twins at number 5 for the Detroit Pistons. I think they'll flirt with Jarris Walker, but they already have a similar type of player in Isaiah Stewart. They also have two bigs in James Wiseman and Jalen Duren. I think Asar Thompson has the ability with his defense. So you've got size with Cade, you're smaller with Jaden Ivey, but you can play Asar at the 2 or the 3. He gives you incredible defense, really solid playmaking. His shots much farther along in development than his brother Amen's. I think they start to build that roster out in Detroit 1 through 3, very solid, and it just they're one of the few teams that makes up for Jaden Ivey's size deficit at the shooting guard, and you can do that with a big wings in Cade and Asar.
So I mean, they would just put Jaden on the point guard and have Cade and the other Thompson twin just lock up. That's I mean, is exactly what I wanted for that Orlando pick. It's honestly exactly what I wanted. And Jarris would be a waste because of Paolo and the Franz and Mortis, but and so it's tough because I think Asur would be perfect for us in Orlando. Anthony, I know that they did this with. This is going to be the first reach of the draft, and I know they did this with Jalen Suggs, but he hasn't really shown out the way I would like. I'm going Cason Wallace from Kentucky because he is a very good defender, so they can lock up. I don't think of him as a true blue point guard. He's more of a combo, but I think his versatility at guarding 1 through 3 very well and being a potential like best guard prospect in this class. And then his shot isn't broken. It still is a quality shot. But I just think of the the Wagner brothers, him locking up. Unfortunately, Asur's not there to play that wing spot, but we're with Jalen Suggs and him guarding the guards. It's just going to be so many options that Orlando can throw out defensively to slow down these elite scorers in the league. So I'm going Cason with the Orlando pick, the first
That's
Orlando pick.
At 7, the Pacers rush to the podium and they take Jarris Walker from Houston. Becomes an incredible pairing defensively with Miles Turner. You've already got your scoring in Ben Mathurin and Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield could be traded, but they still have their scoring, and they have their floor generals and Andrew Nimhard and Tyrese Halliburton. Uh, I think they think about Cam Whitmore if they think he can play the three, but this team needs defense. Ben Mathurin, as we discussed last year's Future Fridays, not interested in that side of the court. Tyrese is not really known for locking up either. So you need to give Miles Turner some interior help, and Jarris could end up being, DPOI potential down the road. So I think it's an easy pick, smart pick,
it's absolutely
BPA, but also fit and need. So Jarris Walker, Indiana.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. I mean, it's the ultimate pick for the Pacers to get Jarris Walker, who has fallen in comparison to this mock draft I'm looking at Tankathon. So we have the Washington Wizards. This team's so it's between Cam and Taylor.
I know who I would go. I know who I think they would choose.
I think they
I
have
know who you want. I
stars.
know who you want to choose,
Yeah,
but
they have the stars in Bradley Beal if he stays, and Casey and Porzingis, and then they have Kyle Kuzma. You know what? I'm doing what I want. They're going Taylor Hendricks to lock up the floor. I mean, they don't need a usage rate player. They don't need a guy that can drive to the lane like a beast and then not finish. I'm going with the guy that has range, that can give space for Bradley Beal, can give space for Chris Tapps to do his thing. I'm going Taylor Hendricks, and maybe they go Cam Whitmore, but you gotta. I just have Taylor so much higher on my personal board than I do Cam Whitmore that I'm going Taylor Hendricks. I think that they need to hit on first round picks eventually. I trust Taylor Hendricks to hit more so than Cam Whitmore.
I mean, I like Taylor better. I don't think the gap is as wide as it is for me as it is for you. I think Taylor's more of a prospect. I think he's a little bit further away. I think Washington might want somebody to win a little bit now and get some fans in the stands, and that's what Cam Whitmore will do. At number 9, I will take Cam Whitmore for the Utah Jazz. I think he can play small forward, and given Walker Kessler, you have Lauri Markkanen, who's going to space the floor. You've got Ochai in the fold, Colin Sexton. I mean, they just take best player available right here. Like, that's what Danny Ainge is going to do. He'll have to open up his 3-point arsenal at some point, especially if he's sharing the floor with Walker Kessler. But he's one of those players that you could look back and say, why did he not go top 5? Like, if he hits, he has potential to be one of the best players from this class. Phenomenal in the passing lanes, just an absolute bully, but has bounce as well. Really fun prospect. If he gets that 3-point shot and opens his blinders up a bit, like takes the blinders off and sees the floor instead of putting his head down and driving to the bucket, he's going to be an absolute nightmare. So I think Utah gladly takes him. They think Anthony Black, but I think Utah takes. They're a smartly run organization right now, and that hurts me to say, but they are, and I think they're going to take the best player available.
I think my biggest issue with Cam is the process between getting to the spot to dunk it and actually dunking it, because he's just right now he's a bad finisher. Walker Kessler being in the paint isn't going to make his life easier, but I do agree with the pick. Like, I think the Jazz would love having Cam Whitmore.
Who do you have the Dallas Mavericks taking at number 10?
I think it's just like last time between Jordan Hawkins and Grady Dick. I think Jordan Hawkins is better, but Grady Dick is much taller, and I think having Kyrie, because I feel like if they're trying to compete, they have to keep Kyrie because they gave up the heart and soul of their team. So having a guy that's like 6'8", 6'9", proper wing size that can hit threes at a high level, he has to buy into defense. But I think Grady Dick can help a lot with his 6'7" frame instead of Jordan Hawkins at 6'5". I just think those few inches of height will help So I'm going Grady Dick with the Dallas Mavericks. I also think that this pick could also be traded, but since this mock isn't for that, I think Grady Dick would help them with spacing the floor for those two guys to dribble and get inside and penetrate the paint. So Grady Dick will be used as the spacing for penetration.
Orlando is on the clock again, and they're I kind of call them Orlando, Toronto of the South because of how they're being built. They just have a bunch of parts. They don't necessarily seem to fit super well together, or they could fit immaculately. Like it's just very unorthodox in how they're constructing their roster. But I don't think that they're going to be able to go stretches with either Franz or Paolo playing the five. Like I don't see that happening. And they just added Case and Wallace. They still have Markelle Fultz. I mean, they still have Jalen Suggs. I think Grady Dick would have been a nice fit, but they still have to address defense. Like they need to get better. I think Orlando's a team that could look to package 6 and 11 to get one of those elite wings. You know, Asar was off the board when you took Kaysen, because that's, I think, really what would need to be addressed for them.
Yeah, I mean, replacing Gary Harris as the scorer.
I'm going to go a little bit off the cusp here. I'm not saying this player is 11th on my board, but looking at what's left, I mean, I would love for them to take Jordan Hawkins, but where is he going to where's he going to play? Like, there's just too many hurdles for them to climb to get that. Okay, so you draft Kaysen and Jordan, but then you already have Markelle and Jalen, and it's just and they have they have Cole Anthony too, so they have so many similar players. I'm going to take a player that they have nothing of, and that's Derek Lively the second. You're looking at a player who's going to shore up your defense. It can allow you to play a massive front line of Franz, Paolo, and Lively. Those two can stretch the floor. You can let Lively operate down low. Paolo and Franz are both playmakers, so they can run nice high-low action. That's the kind of I think we're going to see jumps around this area. That's the jump that I'll take.
That's the biggest jumps thus far.
Yeah, you know,
Orlando has taken the biggest two jumps this draft in this mock
defense
draft.
Is what they need to address, and they get arguably the best perimeter defender in Case and Wallace, and I think they get the second best shot blocker in the draft.
Okay, shot
Lively. Who do you have at number 12? I believe this is Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City.
And I have a fun. I wish I was picking Oklahoma City. I have a somewhat fun pick here.
I have Jordan Hawkins. I feel like they need spacing for Shea and Giddey to do what Shea and Giddey do best, and that's penetrate to the rim and kick out. So you're having the best relocation guard in the league in this draft class. So I think that he would work perfectly. He definitely will need to bulk up to play that defense as the two. But I think with his relocation skills and his shooting ability, he fits what Shea wants to do so well. And then him and Isaiah Joe can be the spacers. I think they put a lot of responsibility on Isaiah. So now you're having another elite shooter with a whole lot of volume in his game. So you have two elite shooters on this team. So they're finally building to help Shea and Josh Giddey. Who is your surprise pick?
There's two guys that I would just knowing how OKC operates, they're a little unconventional. They love size and they love upside. I would be intrigued with them drafting Leonard Miller. And I would also be very intrigued if they took Gigi Jackson, the number 1 overall player in the class of 2022, who played a year at South Carolina. I think he's another player that's going to get drafted based upon high school potential. Didn't have the best year at South Carolina, but
he had a whole lot of usage.
Yeah, the tools are there, and you've got 4 generals in Giddey and Shea that are just going to make everyone's life easier. Those just 2 players. I think Sam Presti loves upside, and you know, you've got Ousmane Dieng, and you've got Jalen Williams, got other Jalen Williams, you've got Chet coming in the mix. So I think Hawkins fits them from a need perspective. I feel, in my opinion, I think OKC views Hawkins as too safe. I like safe picks at this point in the draft. No qualms with you taking Jordan. I think OKC may go, in a different direction. But with the 13th pick, I am able to take one of those guys that I just talked about. For the longest time, I've had Jalen Hood-Schifino going to the Toronto Raptors. I know Anthony Black is a possibility here, but Masai Ujiri could be looking to move on from Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby. I think this could be a Leonard Miller spot. Like, he had a really good, solid year. Not more than solid. He had a spectacular year in the G
20
League.
points, 12 rebounds, man. That's pretty
And
good.
his second year in the G League showed incredible improvement. You watch his tape and you're left wondering, how did he produce? Like, he's the classic tweener. He's like Josh Smith from the Atlanta Hawks. The shot's not pretty, but it kind of goes in.
It kind of goes in, yeah.
And he's just a little herky jerky, a little he's just unorthodox, but he gets results. I do think he's a player that's going to find himself closing in on lottery lane.
Definitely.
So that's why I have him going at 13. And Sage, I've left you with a lot of good options with your Pelicans at number 14.
I feel like I can finally say I'm absolutely a bigger Trailblazers fan. I mean, we've done this for how many damn years?
8.
So yeah, I'm a bigger Blazers fan than I was Pelicans fan. I think once AD left, once Zion got hurt so many times, it kind of changed. And I mean, we've done this for so long, but I do love the Pelicans.
Your boy Drew left too, so
Yeah.
that was your mainstays.
Yeah.
So first off, what's left on. I think the only player that's in most mock drafts right now is Anthony Black that hasn't been selected.
And I don't think New Orleans takes him.
No, they just took Dyson Daniels last year.
They're similar prospects.
Mm-hmm. Dyson's better prospect, in my opinion.
What's up? I think Dyson's better. I mean, no, shit. I don't think Dyson's better. I think Anthony's better. No, it's between Nick Smith and Jet Howard. I think that, you know what, I'm taking Nick Smith because I believe in a lot of what he can do. I think the Arkansas tape is just bad, and you should throw it out for many reasons. The lack of spacing, the recovery of injury. If his knee checks out and he can provide what he did in high school, he's one of those guys that you have to do the high school tape, just like GG Jackson. And the high school tape is really, really impressive. So I'm going with that, but I would not be surprised if Jet Howard was the last lottery pick. But with this mock draft and the fact that I took Jet at 14 last one, I'm going Nick Smith because he has the potential to be one of those off-guard players that at first can't finish with contact, but learn how to do it. I mean, we talked about him earlier in this podcast. Tyrese Maxey was one of those guys. Emmanuel Quickley's one of those guys. Devin Booker was one of those guys. I guess I'm just naming Kentucky players that have difficulty finishing, but the archetype is absolutely there. So I'm going with Nick Smith at the Pelicans at 14.
All right, that wraps up this episode of the Holy Backboard podcast. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. We will be back again with a future Friday of Rayan Rupert, the Frenchman who plays down in New Zealand for the Breakers. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you again. Sage, take this one on home.
All right, we're available on iTunes, Stitcher, Himalaya Podcast. We're available on YouTube, the full video version of this podcast if you're into that. We also are on IG with the reels. You get 50 seconds of the podcast instead of the full hour-long conversation. Same at TikTok. So we're definitely out there. If you have any more questions, please let us know. We're trying to do a monthly or even more frequent mailbag. So if you have questions about this draft process, individual players, free agency questions, please let us know. We will definitely do a podcast to answer it. And thank you so much for listening. This is episode 340, so big episode. So thank you all for listening. We are out of here. Go take care of your baby or / get relaxed. I'm going to play MLB The Show after I edit this bad boy. Peace.